So the first question that we have for Archbishop this afternoon is, what is the Catholic teaching on violence against women and children?
Thank you, Nilesh, and again, thank you for the invite. That question, what is the Church's teaching on violence against women and children? We have a big book called the Catholic Catechism, where it mentions, because it's a little bit, I forget where it's like not very recent. So in that book on the Catholic teachings, it mentions rape. So there is a number on that talks about rape, which is a form of, which is violence and sexual abuse all together in this rape. So the teaching there definitely applies to the Church's teaching on response to domestic violence and sexual violence and abuse. So I will just quote what the Church teaches on this, and I quote, "Rape is the forcible violation of the sexual intimacy of another person. It does injury to justice and charity. Rape deeply wounds the respect, freedom, and physical and moral integrity to which every person has a right. It causes grave damage that can mark the victim for life. It is always an intrinsically evil act, and graver still is the rape of children committed by parents or those responsible for the education of children entrusted to them." So that's a little bit, there are recent documents written around this that is more really down to the very practical thing. On July 16th, the Vatican, that deals with this and acting on behalf of Pope Francis, published again a handbook for dealing with sexual abuse. And in that, it lays down very detailed actions that bishops and churches on how the Catholic Church responds to sexual abuse. Basically, the main points there that when somebody is, not that any small, even if, so the notice of abuse can come to me in many forms. It can be a verbal report, it can be a written report by the victim, it can be a report by a third person, it can even just my going around and observing things, that can be a form of notice, or even if I see it on social media, I should act on that, or even if I hear stories, rumors. So a lot of that goes. So the instructions from the Vatican is very clear that any of those form of notification for me, that it calls me to do an investigation on whatever it is, whether it's a rumor or somebody reports it, and if it involves a minor, if it's a sexual abuse by nature, then we are obligated to report that to the police. And so the instruction is very clear now. It's not only like a teaching, but real practical directives are coming from the Catholic Church through the leadership in Rome about not only what we teach about domestic violence and sexual abuse, but what we do when that happens. And I think the main point there is that we should report when it's involves sexual abuse, and that we do not interfere with civil um, investigations. Apart from that, the legal side of that, we are also to the pastoral care, which means the care of the victim is also important. That and that is what the program that we have now is a response to the pastoral care. But by pastoral means the emotional, the psychological, the health side of the person, and how we are to help the victims of abuse. So I guess that's the main gist of what the church teaches on violence. It's that denounces violence. It's not according to the will of God. It's not according to the teachings of the church. But more than that, it does, for us, it does not remain on a teaching level. It has gone down to really practical instructions for what to do, when to do it. And even this latest instruction from the Vatican is like to make sure that bishops do this thing, and no cover up. So our structure is such that it's like this, like the Archdiocese of Suva is, because it's a metropolitan, because Suva is a metropolitan, there are some small dioceses that come under us, like Kiribati, Tarawa, Nauru. So I am responsible to see that if something happens in Tarawa, Nauru, that I have the responsibility to follow up on that particular bishop that he does. So it's like a backup thing to stop or prevent people, sweeping it under the carpet. I think that's there for that question. Or if there are any questions on that question.
Archbishop, just as a follow-up, if you can share with us what are some of the common misconceptions within the Catholic Church when it comes to violence against women, children, and girls?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I have not really. I know some marriages hold on to their marriage because of the children, for the sake of the children. And I hear this from my experience of running a marriage. There's a program in the Catholic Church called, not only the Catholic Church, in other denominations. In the US, many denominations run this program called the Marriage Encounter Weekend. It's a worldwide marriage encounter. So I don't run it myself. We run it with 3 other couples on a weekend. But there is a role of the priest, and for me, I get an insight and hear what happens in marriages. So some marriages, when the honeymoon and the romantic period is, I see some of you smiling already. When that is over, then when that dust settles, when your mask drops down that you've been trying to show off to your partner. And so some of the common things we hear is, I'm just holding on to this because of the children. And for some it's the marriage vows, the stigma that comes from divorce. So for some that is, don't know whether to call it a misconception, but becomes what do I do, and for the couples that come on this weekend, it's not so much the violence, but just because the romance, the intimacy has like faded out, there's no more juice in the thing, and it's not the violence, but I can imagine if there's violence involved, it will be a big choice of, do I keep this marriage or do I leave? For some traditional, staunch, whatever denomination that you go to. And for the children, that's the dilemma. Okay, I have to, I took these vows. And for some indigenous Fijian people, it's about the tambua, the dowry. We have the dowry system too in Fiji, but it's through the tambua. Your parents might say, hey, we can't return this tambua, and the vows. So it becomes, how do we negotiate between this, and some will stay there for the sake of the children and the vows and the tambua and the dowry too. In the Hindu, in the Muslim culture, this is the dowry too. So in the Catholic Church, when that comes into play, when it's hard to live, then we say that when that happens in the marriage, then the marriage is not honored, because marriage is supposed to be for the good of the spouse first and foremost. Second nature is the children. So for us, our teachings on marriage is first and foremost, you get married because for the good of the husband and the wife, for the good and the wholesomeness of the spouse, and then that goes into the second stage for the children. And so when that is not possible, then we say, well, there's no marriage, because the nature of marriage is there. So then when people come to us to process that, this is what we try to investigate. Was there violence in the family? Was love present? When that is not absent, or when that is absent, then we make the judgment. Well, these two were not married, because the nature and the purpose of marriage, which is love, respect, and complementariness, and for the good of the spouse, is not present. And so that, because the nature of marriage is not present, then we allow them, you can file for, we don't call it divorce, but annulment. We annul the marriage. So I guess what we're saying here, that if there is violence in a marriage, in a relationship, we would not advise, stick to your marriage vows, stick to the safety, your safety and the safety of the children is primary here. And so and if there is, because and violence against women and children is a crime. So we will not say stay there for the sake of the children and their vows when a crime is happening. So that's one misconception. Another one is the marriage vows. So that's one. The other one that I think of is some people use the Bible to condone or to put up with violence. And the one that is used frequently is from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, which says, "Wives, submit to your husband." Every time when this reading comes, there's a electric shock goes up my nerve, and just trying to understand or trying to reading the minds of how women will read this Bible, this particular verse. So for one, we should not use the Bible to support any criminal act. That's not right, because the Bible is supposed to bring out the goodness of God, and we can't misconstrue the Bible to support something that is evil. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the context of this reading. That in those days, in the Roman Greco world, around the time of Jesus and the first 100, at that time, it was common that people have slaves, household slaves or house keepers, and they were part of their household. They owned those people, and then also women were part of that household. But today we live in a different world, In today's civil war, that would be wrong to abuse or to use your authority as the owner of the house to do whatever you want to, because she is your slave or you're part of your household, and women were considered that. So that's the other one. The other one that I think of is forgiveness. To how much can you forgive? Or how much can you go on forgiving, like Jesus? Some people might use that. You should forgive your husband and forgive 7 times 7, as Jesus says, and that is forgive always. And so you can't take the words on the Bible literally. Faith means they are sources of our faith and understanding faith, and that is, one is the Bible or whatever, our scripture. The other thing is reason. Faith must make reason, make sense. The other, faith must hold together. And so the Bible. So forgiveness. If forgiveness means allowing, it might allow somebody to continue doing that, and then it's not good, because you are creating the context for somebody to continue to do this. On the other thing too is that forgiveness does not happen on a one moment situation. Just because you presented a tambur to me, that is forgiveness. You can't also force forgiveness on the person. So forgiveness is something that's gradual. It's a process, and it does not. You cannot just say, "I've forgiven you," and then the problem is it's not a one-time situation. For us, forgiveness or reconciliation it's something that not only involves me, but it involves the restoration of my brokenness, because unless I restore my brokenness, then I can say to somebody, I have forgiven you. And that restoration of the brokenness takes time. And for us, we believe that we cannot fully restore our brokenness. We need somebody's higher power, and that is God, that restores us. Then the broken victim then can say to the perpetrator, "Yes, I forgive you." But it takes a process. So I think those are 3 things that I'd say. I mean, heart of the teachings of religion, like forgiveness and marriage, but can be misconstrued.
Thank you, Archbishop. I think that clears a lot of things for us, and it's really reassuring to hear those messages. Just going back a little bit to why do you think violence against women and children is happening? What's the cause of this?
That's a hard one. I can't put one answer for that. I guess everybody will have their own response to that, but I can only make suggestions here. One is from the church itself. There is, on the statistics about clergy abusing in sexual abuse, they say, the statistics say that the thing really picked up in the 1970s, the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church by clergy. That means priests, brothers, mostly, and others, you know. Be a good study to study what happened in the 1970s. What was the formation, the training of the priests and the religious around that time, because something happened in the 1970s or back 10 years or 15 years when these people went through their training. I can only make some suggestions or assumptions here. During that time, the theology of sexuality is almost like very, very negative. Everything about the body is evil, and the flesh, the drive of the human flesh is sinful, and it's almost like a deprivation of something that is part of our humanity, and that is our sexuality. If you're having sexual desire and you're trying to go to join some life in the church, is something wrong with you, I remember, but I entered to the seminary in 1984, and we have to have a spiritual director with us. I had a woman sister that was my spiritual director, and I went to her with this, tossing around with my own sexuality and how do I handle my own sexuality and sexual drive. So she gave me a small book. I still remember the name of that book, My Beautiful Feelings, and it set me on a positive track towards having a positive attitude towards sexuality. So this could be one of the reason. There's a lot of rigidity in the formation houses of clergy at that time, where the spiritual and the worldly was, you cannot bring them together. So a lot of the priests that time came from high school to the priesthood, so they almost skipped their adolescent stage of life. That could be one reason. Because if you don't, psychology says that life is step by step. If you miss one step, you are bound to fall back again. It's like some people marrying when they are too young. While being married, they still want to flip back to the missed part. So that's one coming from the Catholic Church. There's not. I'd say that there will be a few reasons. So it's like an underdeveloped understanding, integration of human sexuality. Now, a lot of our cultures carry this with us too. It's we don't. It's like taboo. It's not. We are not comfortable in talking about our sexuality, to our children, and at home, this is a topic that we don't talk about. In our marriage encounter, we teach couples that they need to talk about their sexuality. They need to talk about their sex life, and to develop a positive, underdeveloped understanding of human sexuality is one. The literature that I've read mentions the patriarchal society as one of the reasons for this power. A lot of the literature on sexual abuse is blames or puts the finger on that it's about power over abuse. So like the clergy have power over students, or parent, uncle has power over, or older brother has power over. It's always like that. Another thing that I would think, and I see this a little bit in my own life, is because I grew up in a very strict not mostly with one dad. Very if parents if parents are overly strict, domineering and almost depriving children of their freedom to relate with their peers and the opposite sex during adolescence, over strictness can be a cause. I see some of that remnants in my own journey in understanding my own sexuality and the struggles that I go through. Of course, if somebody is a victim, it's very likely that they will spiral this off. I was in one of the parishes that I served. We found, I saw this, that children were doing things that to each other that they should not be doing. You know, almost like abusing their peers sexually. Yeah? But if you found out, if I did a good study of that, I can trace it back to somebody that that we found out was abusing some children. So the spiral. So those are the ones that I think. I think there are others. You'd have to take, case by case to find out the many reasons. One of the books that I'm reading, just man comes back from the Vietnam War, he's broken, abuses his son. So it's the brokenness, I guess it's the brokenness of humanity. And all of us are broken. We, as human beings, we have some form of brokenness. That's why psychology says that all of us have some kind of addiction. It's because of something that is very common to humanity, and that is brokenness. And the extent of that can flow into this to violence and sexual abuse.
Talking about a question. Yeah. So the question is, what leadership are you providing towards addressing the issue of violence against women?
Yeah. Okay. Just to backtrack a little bit, and then I'll tell Sister what she's doing with a small ministry that is called the Women at the Well. In 2015, I attended a bishop's synod in the Vatican, and it's the synod is on the synod on the family, and it took 2 years to. First, they did a working document, and then the working document was then presented to us. So there was 2 rounds, and then we then deliberated on the working document. Out of that working document, then Pope Francis wrote a letter, a small book called The Joys of Love. In Latin, it's called Amores Laetitia. It's a very good book, not only for Catholics, but anybody who wants to work around this area. One of for me, one of the strongest take I took from that book is how the Pope wants us to see, expand our understanding of family, because for a long time we've taken the family as the ideal family, husband, wife, and children. But the reality today, as Pope Francis and that book talks about, is the complexity of family life. It's not European people, and especially Latin. You'll notice when a lot of things are written in Latin and then translated to English. So their words can be a little bit funny sometimes. So to try and explain the complexity of families, they call it, you will not like this word, but irregular families, meaning separated families, divorced, single parents, even children living with grandparents. So these are the complexity of families that that document talks about. People living in irregular family contexts, as opposed to the regular thing. So I attended that second one, and when I came back, I did a little bit a few talks around that, and then when the book was published in 2016, I think, and then we conducted 2 workshops. Normally in the church, when we run workshops, we ask for participants from communities, and we ask you 2 from there, 2 from there, and to make the conference. But with this one, I told our team, let's just advertise, and whoever comes because they want to come. And so there was no asking for representation. We just advertised through Facebook and through the church parishes, and it's I was surprised with we got a good attendance, at St. Joseph Secondary School. But what was new was the new faces. It's not the normal faces that normally come to our church gatherings that attended this meeting, and a lot of them are women. So I just went through one of the ones. This is how the Pope wants us to respond to the complexities of family life, and that is to accompany them, to journey with them, and include them in the community regardless of what their status is. And the last thing you want to tell somebody or a family or somebody that they have been excluded or excommunicated, which means being cut off from the church. That's the last thing you should never do that. Inclusivity is the thing, and to accompany and journey with them. We are Catholics. We are known for our rigidity when it comes to church law and what you can do and what you can't do depending on where you are. But the Pope Francis has said the care of people in this complexity of family complexities is most important. To meet them, accompany them, and make them feel. After the workshop, so we did one here and one in Nandi. We would have loved to do more, but after the workshop, I met a number of people who came with very life-threatening situations, who came to talk to me about the struggles in relationship. There was a woman that came to me, and she's gone through a few number of relationships, and she told me, I'm in a current relationship, but I don't know, so people are on the edge, and after that, I told our team, I think this calls for a response. We have to do something to allow a space for these people, and mostly women, to be able to find a safe place where they can at least come and tell their story, and somebody to listen to them, and to be a first respondent. And that is where we started this, what we are now calling the Women at the Well ministry. And we are taking that word from the meeting of Jesus with this Samaritan woman. Now the Samaritans are not supposed to be talking to the Jews, because of the history and the social religious background between Samaritans and Jews. So this woman meets Jesus at the well, but she's had a few husbands too, and so Jesus ministered. So we took our inspiration from that, and then we developed this ministry called Women at the Well, to allow a space and a group of women in the parish. So what we tried to do was to tell each parish that you should have a Women at the Well group, so that when somebody comes to the church and looking for support, there is a group of women who can be first responders. And so Sister Mariana has been doing that, and she'll be the right person to share a little bit about this. Sister?
Thank you everyone for allowing me to share a little bit brief experience of what we actually do in the Women at the Well ministry. as he has mentioned, we create spaces for our women who are wounded, who are hurt since their childhood, in some cases. Others, their marriage, they've been raped and their marriage bed. And so there are different kinds of stories, but it is like it has been a bondage all these years until they come and tell their stories in a created space where we have trained women in various communities in the Archdiocese of Suva and Fiji, where they can respond to that by creating space in a safe space in their communities where they can sit informally. It doesn't have to be formal. These women to be informal. They sit around with a cup of coffee or tea, and the ones that are coming in, the survivors, or those who are being wounded or hurt for those number of years. And most of all, at this moment, we found out that more of our women who are wounded are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. The young ones are not coming up. I think they're still looking for spaces and somewhere where they will share their story safely. So this Women at the Well has created that space, provided that space for our women in the church communities throughout Fiji, the rural, and also in villages. So from the parish, it trickled right down to the grassroots level. Because this domestic violence or sexual abuse runs right through. It doesn't miss anyone. It's in each one of us. So that is what the churches are afraid at this moment in time, and that we hope to have more training for our women to walk along. The main thing here is to lend a listening ear. They just want someone to sit there and listen to their stories. So, and to tell them and tell them that they are not alone, that we are there as women to journey with her at this hard time, the time that she's going through, especially if she's been hurt so many years. So that is, this ministry is so important, and we roping in not only the Catholics inside. There are other members of other churches, one or two who has already offered their service to be in here in the Women at the Well ministry, and also some men are inside in the well, because we know that it is not only women are hurt, the perpetrators are more hurt as well. They are bringing that and they are using it as punching bags on our women and our girls or children. So we are kind of dealing it very, tenderly, because it's a new concept in the church, and it is also needed. We realize it's very needed in our communities, because women can be running to another house, being used, and they are told, no, please don't come here. I'm not ready to listen to you. No. They are either going through the same thing, or they are just not safe to be there running to that particular household. So, that is where we are at the moment. Thank you. There's a similar question.
No.
Thank you very much. I think time has moved on, and I'm going to open a few questions to the audience and also to people that may be on the teams. If they have a few questions that they can send through, we can, His Grace can address those. So over to you, audience. I'm sure there are lots of questions.
Can I speak on that?
Yes.
journey that you've taken, and particularly in this area, which is a confronting area for a lot of us that work in development. I suspect it's a lot harder to make changes in the church than it is to make in organizations that we work in. How have you managed to make some of these big changes within the church in the work that you do here in Fiji and the region? And what can we learn from that?
Yeah. For me, it's it's something new. I'm not a sexual abuse specialist, did not do any particular studies on this, but it just grew out of this doing the workshops on Pope Francis's on that letter, Joy of Love, and making connections. But as the connections develop, the immensity of the problem grows, and then because of that my interest grows. And then just after these the sexual allegations that blew up here about 2-3 weeks ago, that pushed me some more to do some more reading around this. And I bought 2 books on Kindle just to update, just because I wanted to know more about this, and that has opened up quite a bit, and has inspired me or pushed me further than just the women at the well, to actually to come up with a more holistic program that we could use, and not just be taking a small section of it. And so out of that, we just talked about it a few weeks ago with Sister Maran and our Caritas team about this project or program that we wanted to commit ourselves to it, that tries to cover as much as we can in the areas involved with this thing. So what were we, from my reading and then just putting things together, we have come together, put up a program that will involve 3 things. One is the awareness, the education and awareness or activism. It comes around that area, awareness, education, changing attitudes, addressing the culture in Fiji. So that's one. The other one is that it's more to do with the healing. That we cannot be just doing activism without really addressing the victims. And that's one thing that I've learned from this reading, but also in our conversation with the Catholic Church in Australia, with the Archbishop of Brisbane, because they've gone through quite a lot in. They had a royal commission there with the sexual abuse, and they have learned a lot from there. One of the things they advised us is the pastoral care of the victims is paramount, most important. Forget about the money and the suing and all that. As church, we should respond pastorally. That means with care and compassion, and putting the victims close to at the center. So the healing process for victims, and that when it comes to this, that the victims should be the first closest to us, that we listen to them, that we respond to the victims, rather than trying to rationalize or defend, because it's no use defending, because this thing is real. And the third one is, how do we support victims? So our program is on those 3 phases: the education, awareness, helping victims, providing experiences for healing, And to be able, they say once somebody has been sexually abused or acted upon violently, it makes a scar in their life forever. And especially the sexual abuse, because it's power over, and then it just damages a very important part of our humanness, and that is our sexuality. And it has repercussions on moving on in life. When it comes to marriage, and if you carry this, there's a lot of healing. But there is some things that at least you can do to allow that person to be able to live with that. The other phase is the support group, and that's what and that's what basically what was how the women at the well began. We needed a support group for these people, where they can come and tell their story. You see, what happened to many victims of domestic violence, when this thing was done to them, they were threatened. Don't tell anybody, otherwise I will kill you or do this to you. So they kept this secret for a long time. And secrecy is part of that dynamics, until the time when they found the courage to be able to tell that story. And that's why some Catholics were saying, why now? Why didn't they tell this thing long time ago? This thing happened 20, 30 years ago. But we don't understand what's the mindset of victims. You know, when this was done to them, they were not even aware that it was right or wrong, and they were threatened. So they kept it a secret for a long time, and that is why for them it took them a long time. And for many of them, as I just last Friday I was visiting one of the victims of that I know, and that's what they say. All they wanted was, we want to get this thing out. We want to tell our story, and where to tell them, that's another thing. See, they can't trust anybody because the people that they trusted did this to them. So almost their trust is damaged. So they don't even trust the police. So when I told this person, so you should go and report this thing to the police. He said, oh no. Even the police, they can solve some of this crime happening in Fiji. The place they trust is the media, because they know the media will tell their story. And the media likes sensational stories. So this is what, like you asked my leadership, where we're going forward with this. It's a work in progress. It's something that is just we just really finding our feet as we started from just with the women and the well. Now we are trying to move to a more holistic approach to encompass the whole, to try to be more, to cover all the bases for this. A lot of training will be needed here, like counseling. So next week we will be running a workshop, 3 workshops, one for here, one for the north and one for the west, just to train first responders, building on the women at the well, and for communities. So we've invited other denominations and other ethnic groups. We are happy that we got good response from the Muslim, because as you know, Muslims are quite segregative when it comes to gender, and to offer this the workshop and whatever comes out of that to make it as wide as possible. So I think that's where we're heading.
Thank you, Archbishop. We have a question here from Tupo up in the FSM, and she's asking if you could share with us plans in the future with the Women at the Well ministry.
Yeah, so I've alluded to that already. What we to build on the Women at the Well ministry, one of the things that we will discuss in this workshop, that it is necessary to have support groups for victims. Not only victims, perpetrators too. They also need the restoration of their humanity. But building on the Women at the Well is really the support groups, so that where victims or anybody who has you can be a secondary victim, where people can come together once a week and just tell their story. So the important thing here, Sister Mariana has spoken to, is the listening. The one of the books that I was reading is that we don't do anything, but just by listening, you are actually doing something very important. And so listening and validating the person's story and saying, yes, I believe you. And that gives them a lot of comfort that somebody believes their story, because that is the thing that they struggle with. And if I tell my story, if I say this, will they believe me? See, our culture, that's one of the struggle that victims goes to. And if you listen to that video that was from the TV New Zealand that was circulating around the social media in Fiji about the allegations and the victim was saying, all we needed was to tell our story. But if we went to our parents and to tell our story, our parents, because of the religiosity and the conservatism that some of our parents say in protecting the church, sometimes we're more concerned about protecting the church and listening to the victim and say, you should not do that, don't tell that. So for them, one of the struggle is, who will listen to my story? Who will believe my story? And that's why the church is the last place they go to. I met this victim in a hardware store one time. So I told him, "Can you see, this place is this is a hardware store. Can we come to my office?" He looked at me, he said, "Oh, because many of them are abused in those kind of places, And so, will you believe my story?" That's a big struggle that they go to. So, a big favor that we will in responding is, yes, I hear you and I believe your story. I believe that this happened, and that brings a lot of comfort to them. So this support group there's another program called the Alcoholic Anonymous, commonly known as AA, the 12-step recovery program for alcoholics, and it's expanded to other forms of addiction. And so this is a method that they use to keep them, to find the support. So it follows that method, the AA 12-step. And every time we come, we just tell our story, what happened this week. It's just somebody to listen to, and that keeps us, above the water.
Thank you, Your Grace, and Sister Maria. It's to go from the SDC Micronesian Regional Office in Ponape. My second question was if you could share with us your approaches in caring for the LGBTQI community in your church and in households. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We have not really done as much as we could in that area. What we've just tried to do recently is being very inclusive to LGBT. So we had our synod last year, and we made sure that we had LGBT representatives in that synod. And not only the LGBT, but the dumb, deaf, or the hearing impeded people. That is one of the things that we've tried to do is to be more inclusive of sexual orientation, and even with people with disabilities. We have not really made any precise, program or detailed program to them. The only thing that we've tried to do is to be inclusive of them. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. We have been very inclusive after we see that these places are empty. And it has been very good because we have been doing a lot of sharing stories with them, and that way for them to come into the church. So in pocket groups, yes, we try and bring them in. So we hope to have them as well in this upcoming event, conference that we are having next week. So like that, we try very slowly and also at the same time to be more sensitive, because I have been with them in a lot of meetings, and they would like to be upheld in their dignity and what their desire, what they want us to be addressing them. And around that area we have to be very sensitive. So I have joined a lot of their meetings with the Rainbow, with the Viva, with the survivors, sex workers, survivors. So there are a few of them transgenders, a lot of them around. So we are very sensitive to that. So like what Archbishop said, we hope they'll be in the future. We'll bring them to awareness, educational awareness, so that we are inclusive, and also the disability or special people that we have in our communities. Thank you.